Have you ever found yourself reaching for, say, a natural remedy? Maybe some ginger tea if your stomach's upset, or perhaps one of those herbal syrups when you've got a cough that just, well, won't quit.
Oh, absolutely. It feels almost instinctive, doesn't it?
It really does. There's this profound knowledge, often woven into ancient traditions, a kind of wisdom that modern science is now, really meticulously unearthing, and sometimes with truly astonishing results.
That's a perfect lead-in.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a fascinating journey that bridges exactly that gap.
Yeah.
The centuries-old wisdom of traditional medicine and the cutting-edge insights of modern cancer research.
We're zeroing in on a really remarkable plant.
That's right, the balloon flower, or
Oops.
Platycodon Grandiflorum. And specifically, a powerful compound extracted directly from its root, Platycodon D.
Exactly. For centuries, this, well, pretty unassuming plant has been a foundational element in East Asian traditional medicine, mostly revered for its effectiveness in dealing with respiratory issues, coughs, phlegm, that sort of thing. Yeah. But as we've sifted through our sources, a truly compelling narrative has emerged from its scientific evolution. Modern research is now, intensively investigating its profound potential in the ongoing battle against cancer.
And specifically how Platycodon D seems to act directly on cancer cells, right? At that fundamental cellular level.
That's the core focus, yes. The direct action.
So our mission today is to take this, the stack of recent research, everything from highly detailed scientific reviews to, shorter executive summaries, and really extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
We'll dive deep into what Platycodon D actually is, how it works with precision at that cellular level.
And crucially, the specific types of cancer where it's shown genuinely promising results, at least in these rigorous laboratory settings.
And because this topic is, well, let's face it, so vital, especially for anyone navigating health questions, perhaps for themselves or their loved ones, we want to make sure you get the most essential information right up front. So we're going to begin by highlighting some key findings with a direct focus on Platycodon D's immediate impact on cancer cells.
Presented in a way that's accessible, clear, sort of a quick overview first.
Exactly. We want to give you the core takeaways first, particularly for those of you who appreciate a straightforward summary without really getting lost in the deeper scientific weeds. Hashtag one. The balloon flower, a journey from tradition to modern science.
Okay, let's really unpack this fascinating plant, Platycodon Grandiflorum. It's actually quite charming, isn't it? Often called the balloon flower or Chinese bellflower.
That name comes right from its flower buds, which look like little balloons before they pop open. Really distinctive.
They swell up, these little buds, and then burst into this beautiful 5-lobed bell-shaped flower, usually purple-blue. It's a perennial herbaceous plant, so it lives for years, no woody stem.
Right, not like a shrub or tree.
And it's native to East Asia, China, Korea, Japan, even parts of Russia. You can imagine fields of them.
It's beautiful, but what's truly captivating for our purposes is its deep, deep history within traditional medicine. The root, specifically the root, is the key part.
Known as Platycodonus radix or Zhizheng in Chinese, right?
Precisely. And it holds this venerable place. Its first formal documentation appears way back in one of the earliest, most influential texts on medicines from natural sources, the Shannon Materia Medica Classic.
Wow, how far back does that go?
We're talking thousands of years. This text really solidified the balloon flower's status as, a medicinal powerhouse centuries and centuries ago.
And traditionally, what was its main use? You mentioned respiratory.
Yes, primarily for a range of respiratory conditions. Things like persistent coughs, nagging sore throats, tonsillitis, that uncomfortable feeling of chest congestion. Its essential role was seen as helping resolve phlegm and, importantly, stopping coughs. Relief for very common ailments.
Makes sense. But it wasn't just medicine, was it?
That's a really interesting point highlighted in our sources. It's now classified as a medicine and food homology herb, meaning it has this dual role, recognized both as medicine and food, which really underscores its inherent safety profile. You see this particularly in Korean culture.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, the balloon flower root isn't just some old remedy there. It's actually a pretty common culinary ingredient. You'll find it in popular dishes like savory salads called namul and the famous bibimbap, that mixed rice dish.
No kidding, eaten just like any other vegetable.
Pretty much. And it's consumed not just for its sort of unique earthy flavor, but also for its recognized health benefits, like potentially enhancing the immune system.
So this extensive centuries-long history of safe human consumption both as medicine and food.
Exactly. It provides a remarkably strong and, frankly, reassuring foundation for the modern scientific investigation into its properties. It tells us generations have safely used this gland. That's a vital starting point when you're looking at potential new therapies.
That long history, it really is something, isn't it? That kind of deep, intuitive trust is now being backed up by hard science. And when we look at why it's so powerful, it really boils down to its chemistry, right? Its rich chemical profile.
Absolutely. The plant is just packed with complex bioactive compounds, phytochemicals. But the undisputed stars, the compounds really driving its most impactful effects, belong to a specific group called triterpenoid saponins.
Saponins, okay.
Precisely. And among these, Platycodon DPD, as we'll probably call it, stands out. It's the primary driver of its impressive pharmacological activities.
A main player.
It's identified as the most abundant and, critically, the most pharmacologically active of these compounds. In fact, it's so important that it's now routinely used as a quality control marker for commercial preparations.
Meaning if you buy balloon flower root extract, they check for PD levels.
Essentially, yes. To ensure quality, purity, and potency, scientists look for a specific, measurable amount of Platycodon D. It's the benchmark.
Got it. And chemically, what makes PD special?
Well, its structure is key. It's what's called a D-glycosidic saponin, meaning it has two distinct sugar chains attached to its core molecule.
Why does that matter? 2 sugar chains versus 1.
It matters because this specific D-glycosidic design has been observed in studies to cause significantly less hemolytic activity.
Hemolytic activity, breaking down red blood cells.
Exactly. Rupturing or damaging red blood cells. Some other saponins can be more problematic in that regard. So PD structure potentially contributes to a more favorable safety profile. That's a major plus when considering any therapeutic agent.
Makes sense. Fewer side effects, ideally.
Right. And beyond its emerging anti-cancer properties, which we'll dive into, our sources confirm that PD is already recognized for potent anti-inflammatory effects, its ability to modulate the immune system, and even potential in anti-obesity applications.
Wow, quite the resume already.
It really is. This multifaceted activity truly sets the stage for just how versatile and potentially impactful this natural compound might be.
Okay, here's where it gets truly fascinating, especially, as you said, for those looking for that clear, concise overview. What can Platycodon D directly do against various cancers based on these lab studies?
Exactly. Think of this next section as your quick reference list. The essential takeaways on direct action, without getting too bogged down in the deep science just yet. This is the core message we want you to have up front.
Perfect. So what have the lab studies shown?
Well, in laboratory settings, primarily using cancer cells grown in dishes, sometimes animal models, Platycodon D has consistently shown a pretty striking ability to either kill cancer cells outright or powerfully stop them from growing and spreading.
These are direct observable effects.
Direct effects, seen again and again in these preclinical models. So for our general audience, and perhaps especially for seniors who want the key headlines, let's quickly run through some of the most compelling examples of cancers where Platycodon D has shown these direct significant actions.
All right, let's hear them.
Okay, first up, lung cancer. Specifically, the most common type, non-small cell lung cancer, NSCLC. Studies show Platycodon D directly reduces the viability, basically the health and survival of these lung cancer cells.
And stops their growth.
And critically, yes, stops their uncontrolled growth. It actively tells these rogue cells to stop multiplying and even seems to trigger their natural self-destruct processes.
Yeah.
Direct killing action.
Okay, lung cancer. What's next?
Next, breast cancer. Here, Platycodon D looks especially promising against some of the more aggressive forms, like triple-negative breast cancer, TNBC.
Which is notoriously hard to treat, right?
Exactly, because it lacks the common molecular targets that many other therapies rely on. But in the lab, Platycodon D directly inhibits the growth of these aggressive cells and stops them from multiplying.
That's significant for TNBC.
Very significant. A potential new angle for a cancer type that desperately needs new, effective options.
All right. What about digestive cancers?
Moving on to gastrointestinal cancers. Let's look at stomach cancer and colorectal cancer. In lab studies, Platycodon D shows direct toxicity to gastric cancer cells. It halts their growth and pushes them towards cell death.
And importantly,
it seems to do this while being significantly gentler on normal stomach cells. That selectivity is always a key goal. Kill the cancer, spare the healthy tissue.
and colorectal.
For colorectal cancer, it directly influences specific internal pathways within the cells that lead to their death and stop their uncontrolled growth. Again, a direct impact.
Okay, so lung, breast, stomach, colorectal. What about blood cancers?
Good question. For leukemia and lymphoma, Platycodon D has demonstrated powerful direct effects too. It induces cell death and disrupts the energy production of the mitochondria in cells from acute myeloid leukemia, AML, and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, DLBCL.
Hitting their power source.
Essentially, yes, a strong, direct, destructive impact on these rapidly dividing blood cancer cells.
Okay. Any others for this quick list?
Yes, two more key ones. Prostate cancer. Here, it effectively targets prostate cancer cells, causing them to die or stop dividing. But what's truly noteworthy, again, is its selectivity.
It leaves the normal prostate cells alone.
Largely unharmed, according to these studies. This selective action is a very, very positive sign. It suggests a potential for fewer side effects compared to agents that hit healthy cells too.
That's crucial. And the last one?
Finally, papillary thyroid cancer, or PTC. In lab models, Platycodon D has been shown to directly inhibit the growth and progression of these thyroid cancer cells. It does this by shutting down a key pathway they rely on to survive and grow.
Disrupting their survival mechanism.
Exactly. Crucial for slowing or stopping the cancer's advance in these models.
So just to recap that quick list, lung, breast, especially TNBC, stomach, colorectal, leukemia, lymphoma, prostate, and papillary thyroid cancer. That's quite a range.
It really is. These are direct actions observed right there in the lab against a wide variety of tough cancers. And this broad activity, hitting multiple types, is exactly what makes Platycodon D such a compelling candidate for, potential new treatments from natural sources.
It's really attacking cancer through multiple direct angles, isn't it? Not just one specific vulnerability. It feels like it gives the cancer cells fewer places to hide.
That's a crucial point that really bears repeating. It's not a narrowly focused agent hitting just one target. Its foundational anti-cancer strategies observed across these different types consistently involve inducing programmed cell death, these processes called apoptosis and autophagy.
The cell's self-destruct buttons.
Pretty much. And it actively stops fundamental tumor expansion processes, things like angiogenesis. That's the formation of new blood vessels tumors need to grow.
Seeding the tumor.
Right. And invasion into surrounding healthy tissues, and metastasis, which is that terrifying spread to distant organs. It's tackling the core biological behaviors that make cancer so dangerous.
And you mentioned selectivity several times. That seems really important.
Critically important. These studies consistently highlighted selectivity for malignant cells over healthy ones. For instance, in those prostate cancer studies, significant toxicity to cancer cells, minimal effect on non-malignant cells. Same story in gastric cancer models, tougher on cancer cells, gentler on normal gastric mucosal cells.
So the potential for fewer side effects.
That's the hope. This inherent selectivity suggests a lower potential for that collateral damage to healthy tissues that often comes with conventional chemotherapy. It positions Platycodon D as a compound with a potentially favorable safety profile, which is, of course, a major advantage for any potential therapeutic. Fewer harsh side effects for patients is always the goal.
That inherent selectivity hitting the bad guys but sparing the good guys is absolutely vital. But how exactly does it do that? What's the clever cellular strategy behind these direct effects across such a diverse range of cancers?
Right. Let's dig a bit deeper into the how now. Keep in mind, cancer cells are incredibly adaptable, always looking for loopholes. But what the research suggests is that Platycodon D is like a master strategist, figuring out specific weak spots in each cancer type's armor.
Okay, so where should we start? Maybe back with lung cancer.
Good place to start. Non-small cell lung cancer, NSCLC. In the lab, using NSCLC cell lines, PD significantly reduces cell viability, as we said, but it also inhibits their ability to form colonies. That's how they multiply and create new tumor masses.
And it's potent.
Quite potent, yes. The amount needed to inhibit growth by 50%, that IC50 value we'll talk more about later, is in the low micromolar range for several cell lines, like H1299 and A549.
What?
That indicates a strong direct effect in the lab dish.
So how does it kill them? What's the mechanism?
Well, the primary mechanism driving programmed cell death, or apoptosis, in NSCLC seems particularly interesting. Platycodon D directly boosts the production of a protein called POMA.
POMA.
Yes, POA. Think of it as a self-destruct trigger for cancer cells. PD activates a key internal signaling pathway involving things called JNK1 and AP1 that essentially gives the execute command for cell death by making more POAA.
Okay, so it triggers self-destruction, is that it?
Not quite. Concurrently, it forces the cancer cells into another form of programmed death called autophagy. It achieves this through a kind of dual-pronged attack.
Ah, so.
It shuts down the cancer's main survival pathway, the PI3K-ACT-mTOR pathway, which is often hyperactive in tumors, and simultaneously activates internal stress signals within the cell, involving other pathways like JNK and P38-MAPK.
So less survival signal, more stress signal.
Exactly. This double whammy creates this overwhelming, inescapable stress environment for the cancer cell. It makes it exceedingly difficult for the tumor to resist. Think of it like a cancer cell having two emergency exits, and Platycodon D isn't just blocking one, it's actively triggering a collapse from both sides. Escape becomes virtually impossible.
Wow, that is a sophisticated attack for a single compound.
It really suggests a high level of strategic action at the cellular level.
Okay, let's turn to breast cancer, especially that tough one, triple-negative breast cancer, TNBC. You mentioned it lacks the usual targets. How does PD handle that challenge?
Right. TNBC is a challenge. PD shows potent growth inhibition in TNBC cell lines like the well-known MDA-MB231 line. And critically, it induces cell cycle arrest, essentially hitting the brakes on the uncontrolled proliferation of these aggressive cells, stopping them in the G0, G1 phase of their cycle.
And the mechanism there, is it similar to lung cancer?
It's different, actually, highlighting PD's versatility. A key action observed in TNBC is its targeting of a crucial interaction between two proteins, MDM2 and P53.
P53, the tumor suppressor.
Usually, yes. But this is profoundly important because many aggressive cancers, including these TNBC cells, have mutated forms of the P53 gene. When mutated, P53 often gains new cancer-driving abilities. It becomes an oncogene.
So the guardian turns into a villain.
In many cases, yes. And MDM2 can protect and stabilize these villainous mutant P53 proteins, allowing them to fuel cancer growth. What Platycodon D seems to do is interfere with MDM2.
How?
It downregulates MDM2, which leads to the destabilization and degradation, basically, the destruction of this oncogenic mutant P53 protein.
So it gets rid of the villain P53. What does that achieve?
The consequence is really profound. By removing the mutant P53, the cell can then increase the production of natural cell cycle inhibitors, proteins like P21 and P27. These proteins then enforce that cell cycle arrest we talked about, preventing the cancer cells from dividing.
That sounds like a really clever workaround.
It has immense implications. Roughly half of all human cancers have P53 mutations. Many of these mutations give P53 these dangerous gain-of-function properties that drive tumor progression, spread, and even resistance to chemo.
So PD hitting MDM2
Could be a powerful strategy to disarm a central engine of many cancers. It's like finding a way to remove the accelerator that cancer cells often mistakenly install where their brakes should be.
a really unique angle. Okay, moving to gastrointestinal cancers, colorectal and gastric. You mentioned PD had some very specific direct effects here too.
Yes, in gastric cancer models, PD demonstrates that remarkable selective toxicity again. It effectively inhibits growth and colony formation in various gastric cancer cell lines, but normal gastric cells seem much more resistant.
And its direct effect, cell cycle arrest and apoptosis again.
Yes, it induces cell cycle arrest in the G1 phase and promotes programmed cell death. The primary target identified in gastric cancer seems to be a highly unstable oncoprotein called c-MYC.
T-MYC, I've heard of that one. A major cancer driver.
Absolutely, a master regulator of cell growth, acting like a powerful accelerator. Platycodon D was found to promote the degradation of c-MYC. This depletion, this reduction in c-MYC, then links directly to that G1 cell cycle arrest, effectively putting the brakes on uncontrolled cancer cell division.
Hitting another key accelerator, what about colorectal cancer?
In colorectal cancer, it also has direct growth-inhibiting effects. But the mechanisms studied seem a bit more multifaceted in the available literature. It definitely influences pathways that lead to cell death and growth arrest.
For example?
For example, some studies show it can modulate the S2YAP1 axis of something called the Hippo pathway. This pathway is critical for controlling cell proliferation and organ size. By interfering here, it forces cancer cells to halt their uncontrolled growth and triggers their self-destruction.
So direct impact, but maybe hitting slightly different internal switches compared to gastric cancer.
It seems so, yes. It shows versatility in adapting its attack strategy to the specific vulnerabilities of different GI cancers.
And what about hematological malignancies? Blood cancers like leukemia and lymphoma. They behave quite differently from solid tumors. Does PD show direct promise there?
It absolutely does. PD shows potent activity in preclinical models of acute myeloid leukemia, AML, and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, DLBCL, which is the most common non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Potent.
In both AML and DLBCL cell lines, PD effectively induces cell death through apoptosis, and it also causes significant mitochondrial dysfunction. Remember, mitochondria are the cell's powerhouses.
So hitting the energy supply again.
Exactly. Disrupting them is a direct hit to the cancer cell's ability to function and survive.
And the mechanism behind that in blood cancers.
It seems to involve suppressing critical pro-survival signaling pathways. In AML, for instance, it triggers that mitochondria-dependent apoptosis and induces cell cycle arrest by hitting two major pathways simultaneously, the PI3KT pathway and the MAPKIRK pathway.
Hitting both survival switches at once.
Yes, these are like major on switches for cancer cell survival and proliferation. This dual inhibition seems key to its direct and powerful impact on these rapidly dividing blood cancer cells. It effectively shuts down their core machinery for survival.
That breadth of impact is just incredible. Are there other solid tumors where it shows direct effects? It really seems like a versatile agent.
It truly stands out for its broad spectrum activity. It extends to a diverse array of other solid tumors, often with distinct mechanisms, which highlights what we call Platycodon D's pleiotropic or multi-effect nature.
Okay, give us some examples.
Well, prostate cancer, as we mentioned in the quick list. Remarkable selectivity hitting cancer cells hard, leaving normal prostate cells largely unharmed in these studies.
And the mechanism there.
It induces apoptosis and cell cycle arrest. But the way it does it is by activating a tumor suppressor protein called FOXO3A. This protein normally tries to stop cancer growth. PD activates it by downregulating MDM2, which usually keeps FOXO3A in check.
So it removes a brake on a natural cancer-fighting mechanism within the cell.
Precisely. A very neat mechanism.
What else?
Then there's glioblastoma, one of the most aggressive brain tumors, very difficult to treat. PD uses a pretty unique mechanism here. It induces cell death by inhibiting autophagy.
Wait, I thought autophagy was sometimes a death mechanism PD-induced.
It can be complex. Autophagy is normally a cellular recycling process. In some contexts, pushing it too far kills the cell. In other contexts, like here in glioblastoma, according to these studies, inhibiting it can be fatal too. PD's inhibition leads to a toxic buildup of cholesterol within the cell's lysosomes, the waste disposal units.
Clogging up the works.
Exactly. This lysosomal dysfunction ultimately proves fatal to the glioblastoma cells. And PD also inhibits their proliferation, migration, and invasion, all crucial for stopping spread in the brain.
Fascinatingly different mechanism. Any others?
Yes, endometrial cancer. Here, PD seems to curb malignant behavior proliferation, invasion, migration by upregulating or increasing the expression of a specific receptor on the cell surface, the A2A adrenergic receptor.
Increasing a receptor, how does that help?
Because the increased activity of this specific receptor then leads to the inhibition of that critical pro-survival PI3K ACT signaling pathway we keep mentioning.
So it's like installing a new switch on the cell's exterior that then turns off its internal growth engine.
Yeah, it's a great analogy for it, yes.
And one more.
And finally, hepatocellular carcinoma, HCC, or primary liver cancer. Here, PD demonstrates its ability to induce both apoptosis and autophagy, that dual cell death mechanism, again mediated by activating specific stress signaling pathways like ERK and JNK, directly leading to the demise of liver cancer cells.
So across the board, it's proving highly versatile, using different strategies, but consistently showing direct effectiveness against a wide array of cancers in these preclinical settings.
That's the key takeaway from this section, yes. Direct, versatile, and often selective action in the lab.
Okay, so we've established this remarkable direct anti-cancer effect across so many different cancer types. But the research around papillary thyroid carcinoma, PTC, seems to reveal something, well, even deeper, doesn't it? Something potentially transformative about its utility.
It really does. This is where the story moves beyond just PD killing cancer cells directly.
It's about making other powerful treatments work better, enhancing their capabilities.
Exactly. It raises the important question: what makes PTC particularly interesting for Platycodon D, especially in this context of enhancing other treatments?
Right. Why thyroid cancer specifically for this synergistic effect?
Well, PTC is the most common endocrine cancer, the vast majority of thyroid cancers. And generally, yes, it has an excellent prognosis, often slow-growing, highly treatable with surgery.
But not always simple.
Not always. In some cases, it can be more aggressive, or it can become resistant to standard therapies, particularly if it spreads to lymph nodes or becomes refractory, meaning resistant to radioactive iodine treatment, which is a common follow-up after surgery.
Okay. And standard care is usually surgery, maybe radioactive iodine, and hormone replacement.
That's the typical approach, yes.
Yep.
Surgery, sometimes radioactive iodine, and then lifelong thyroid hormone replacement. But the therapeutic landscape for PTC is evolving rapidly. There's a move towards de-escalation for very low-risk cases to avoid overtreatment. But for advanced cases, we're seeing sophisticated targeted therapies emerge, multi-kinase inhibitors, gene-specific inhibitors for mutations like BRAF, which is common in PTC.
And immunotherapy, where does
Right.
that fit in?
That's the crucial part here. Modern immunotherapy, specifically anti-PD-1 antibodies like Pembrolizumab, is still finding its place in thyroid cancer. As a monotherapy used on its own, Pembrolizumab has shown pretty limited efficacy in thyroid cancer overall.
Limited how?
Low response rates. A key study, Keynote 158, showed only about a 6.8% response rate in thyroid cancer patients. That's quite low compared to its success in other cancers like melanoma or lung cancer.
So there's a clear need to make immunotherapy work better in thyroid cancer.
Precisely. A need for combination strategies.
So given that context, where does Platycodon D fit into this complex picture for thyroid cancer? How does it enhance other treatment?
What's truly fascinating, this comes directly from preclinical research, is the finding that Platycodon D inhibits the malignant progression of papillary thyroid carcinoma by targeting the NF-κB signaling pathway.
NF-kappa B. That sounds important.
It's a central control hub inside cells for survival and proliferation. When it goes haywire, when it's dysregulated, that's common in many cancers, including more aggressive forms of thyroid cancer. It's even linked to that common BRAF V600E mutation in PTC.
So Platycodon D strikes at a core disease mechanism, not just a symptom. It disrupts the machinery the cancer uses to thrive.
Exactly. But here's the really transformative part. The research explicitly demonstrates that Platycodon D enhances the therapeutic efficacy of Pembrolizumab in PTC models.
Enhances the immunotherapy.
Yes. This moves Platycodon D beyond just being a direct killer agent. It positions it as an immunosensitizer.
Meaning it helps the immune system do its job better against the cancer.
That's the idea. It effectively helps the body's own immune system, particularly its T cells, to better recognize and attack the cancer.
How does it do that?
This is potentially a game-changer in immuno-oncology. Remember how Pembrolizumab struggles against cold tumors?
Right. Tumors the immune system doesn't really notice or attack effectively.
Exactly. They lack immune cell infiltration. They lack inflammation. They're essentially hiding. Platycodon D, through that core mechanism of inhibiting NF-κB, seems to address this very issue directly.
Okay, break down that synergistic mechanism for us. How does inhibiting NF-kappa B help Pembrolizumab?
All right, so Platycodon D inhibits NF-κB activity inside the cancer cell.
Okay.
Why is this crucial? Because NF-κ acts like a master switch that turns on a specific gene called CD274.
And what does the CD274 gene do?
It produces a protein called PDL1.
PDL1. That's the target of drugs like Pembrolizumab, right? Or rather, Pembrolizumab targets PD-1 on T cells, which binds to PDL1.
Exactly. PDL1 is like a don't eat me signal, or maybe more like an invisibility cloak on the cancer cell surface. It binds to the PD-1 receptor on immune T cells and delivers an inhibitory turn-off signal. It basically tells the T cell, nothing to see here, move along, allowing the cancer to evade immune destruction.
Okay, so PD inhibits NF-kappa B.
Which means less activation of the CD274 gene.
Which means less PD-L1 protein gets made and put on the cancer cell surface.
Precisely. With less PD-L1 cloak, the tumor's ability to turn off T cells is significantly weakened. Now, Pembrolizumab, which works by blocking that PD-1-PD-L1 interaction, can function much more effectively because the immunosuppressive signal it targets is already diminished at its source by Platycodon D.
Wow. So PD helps take off the cancer's invisibility cloak.
In essence, yes.
Right.
It helps unmask the tumor to the immune system. It has this profound potential to convert an immunologically cold tumor, one ignored by the immune system, into a hot tumor, creating fertile ground for immunotherapy to work its magic.
That directly addresses a huge challenge in oncology, improving response rates to these powerful immunotherapies.
It really does. This finding is incredibly exciting because it suggests Platycodon D could be a crucial piece of the puzzle in making these potentially life-saving treatments accessible and effective for more patients. It's like turning up the volume on the immune system's attack signal against the cancer. #tag55, understanding potency and core mechanisms.
Okay, we've talked about direct effects across many cancers and this amazing synergistic effect with immunotherapy in thyroid cancer models. When scientists compare the strength, the potency of Platycodon D's direct action from one cancer type to another in the lab, how do they do that? Is there a standard measure?
Yes, there is. We use a metric called the IC50 value. That stands for half maximal inhibitory concentration.
Okay, what does that mean in simple terms?
It essentially tells us the concentration of Platycodon D needed to inhibit the growth of cancer cells by 50% in a lab dish experiment. So a lower IC50 number means you need less of the compound to achieve that 50% inhibition.
Lower IC50 means higher potency, like needing less medicine to get the job done.
Exactly. It's a standard way to compare potency in these preclinical in vitro settings.
So when we look at the IC50 landscape for Platycodon D across the different cancers we discussed, what patterns emerge? Where is it most potent?
Well, based on the reviewed literature, Platycodon D shows its highest potency, meaning IC50 values under 10 micromolar against certain breast cancer cell lines, like that aggressive MDA MB231 line we mentioned, where it was around 7.77 to 1.
Okay.
It also showed similar high potency against several non-small cell lung cancer cell lines. For example, H12I9 cells showed an IC50 of 7.8 mAm, H2030 was 9.6 mAm, and A549 was just over the cusp at 10.3 mAm. These are concentrations demonstrating a very strong direct effect in the lab dish for those specific cell types.
So particularly potent against certain lung and breast cancer cells in vitro, where does it show moderate potency?
We see moderate potency with IC50 values roughly between 10 and 30 m against prostate cancer cell lines studied, like PC3, around 11.17 mn, and D145, around 26.13 m. Still significant effect, just requiring a slightly higher concentration in the dish compared to the lung or breast lines.
And lower potency.
On the lower end of potency observed in these studies, with an IC50 greater than 30 m, we find hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer cell lines, like BEL7402, which had an IC50 around 37.702.
Interesting. And you mentioned for some cancers, IC50 wasn't the main focus.
That's right. For some cancers discussed, like papillary thyroid, colorectal, and gastric cancer, specific IC50 values weren't consistently reported or emphasized in the reviewed literature. The studies seem to focus more on elucidating the mechanisms of action or, importantly, demonstrating synergy with other agents, rather than just pinpointing the exact concentration needed for 50% growth inhibition on its own.
Got it. So the focus shifts depending on the cancer type and the research question.
Precisely. But here's the crucial caveat we absolutely must emphasize again.
Let me guess. Lab results don't always equal human results.
Exactly. IC50 values are in vitro measures. They come from experiments in a controlled lab dish environment, using isolated cells. They do not directly translate to clinical efficacy or the right dosage in humans.
Why not?
Because human biology is vastly more complex. Factors like how much of the compound actually gets absorbed into the bloodstream, how it's metabolized by the liver and other organs, how it distributes to different tissues, including the tumor itself, how long it stays in the body, potential interactions with other medications, and the patient's own immune system. All these play a massive role in vivo, inside a living person.
So these IC50 numbers are useful guides for researchers.
Extremely useful for preclinical comparisons, for understanding relative potency, and for guiding further research, yes.
Right.
But they are just one piece of a very large puzzle. We must always interpret them with appropriate caution until we have data from human clinical trials. They tell us what's possible in the lab, not what will happen in a patient.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. So stepping back from the specific numbers, what does this all mean for the big picture? Are there common threads, shared strategies in how Platycodon D attacks these different cancers, despite their varied natures? Does it have a kind of signature move?
Absolutely. If we connect all these dots, a truly remarkable consistency emerges across the different studies and cancer types. Platycodon D consistently seems to modulate or influence two absolutely central signaling pathways within cancer cells.
Which pathways are those?
They are the PI3K actinitor pathway and the MAPK, that's mitogen-activated protein kinase pathways.
Okay, those sound complicated, but why are they so important in cancer?
Because they are essentially the superhighways or the central control centers for many of the hallmarks of cancer. Think uncontrolled growth, proliferation, cell survival, resisting programmed cell death signals. They are the master switches that most cancers learn to hijack to fuel their survival and relentless expansion.
So PD interferes with these critical hubs.
Yes, and it does so across various cancer types. For instance, in AML, we saw it inhibits both PI3K8 and MAPKIRK. In NSCLC, it inhibits PI3-cACT-mTOR while activating other stress-related MAPK pathways like JNK and P38. In breast cancer models, it suppresses signaling related to ACT and MBK. In endometrial cancer, it inhibits PI3-CACT, in HCC, it activates stress MPKs like ERK and JNK. In colorectal cancer, we saw it inhibits PI3-CACT when sensitizing cells to another drug.
So it keeps hitting these two major axes, PI3, CACT-mTOR, and MAPK, again and again, maybe in slightly different ways depending on the cancer.
Exactly. This consistent targeting of these two fundamental axes likely explains Platycodon D's broad-spectrum anti-cancer activity. It isn't just exploiting a niche vulnerability found in only one type of cancer. Instead, it's attacking the core fundamental machinery that most, if not all, cancers co-opt to survive and thrive.
That makes it seem like a more foundational anti-cancer agent.
That's a great way to put it. The specific biological outcome of hitting these pathways might differ slightly depending on the unique genetic wiring of each cancer type, whether it leads more strongly to apoptosis, cell cycle arrest, or enhancing other therapies. But the primary points of attack, these central signaling hubs, are remarkably consistent across the board based on the current research. It certainly makes it a very compelling compound for further investigation.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the traditional uses of the balloon flower root to these incredibly exciting preclinical findings about Platycodon D's direct actions and its potential to boost immunotherapy. It paints a really promising picture in the lab. But realistically, what's the journey like from these results to something that could actually help patients in a clinic? It's often a long, challenging road, right?
Oh, absolutely. This raises the critical question, and it's one we really can't overstate. Despite the compelling, extensive preclinical evidence supporting Platycodon D's potential, the path from that lab discovery to widespread clinical application is indeed fraught with significant hurdles. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
What are the main roadblocks?
There are several critical translational challenges that absolutely must be systematically addressed before PD could even be considered for human clinical trials, let alone be approved for patient use.
Okay, what's number one?
Probably the most critical is bioavailability and formulation. This is a common issue with natural compounds, especially complex molecules like triterpenoid saponins. Platycodon D is likely to have poor oral bioavailability, meaning if you just swallow it, not much gets absorbed into your bloodstream and probably limited solubility in water.
Like trying to dissolve oil in water, you said.
Exactly. So simply taking it as a pill might not deliver enough active compound to the tumor site to have a therapeutic effect. Overcoming this is a major pharmaceutical engineering challenge.
So how do researchers tackle that?
Future development absolutely requires advanced drug delivery systems. We're talking about sophisticated strategies like encapsulating PD within tiny nanoparticles, or formulating into self-assembling structures called Micell's microscopic spheres that can carry the drug through the bloodstream. Other novel dosage forms might also be explored.
Like they've done for other natural compounds.
Precisely. The successful nanoformulation of compounds like curcumin, for example, provides a potential roadmap. But these are essential steps to improve its pharmacokinetics, how the body absorbs, distributes, metabolizes, and excretes the drug, and to ensure that therapeutically effective concentrations can actually be achieved in vivo, inside the body. It's a significant investment of time, research, and resources.
Okay, bioavailability is a big one. What else?
A second major consideration is the toxicity profile. Now, PD showed promising selectivity for cancer cells in lab models and seemed generally well tolerated in animal studies where human tumors were grown in mice. However,
Animal studies aren't humans.
exactly. A comprehensive toxicological assessment is absolutely paramount before human trials can even begin. Saponins, as a class, remember, are known for their potential to cause hemolysis damage to red blood cells.
Even though PD structure might make it less likely.
Even so, it must be rigorously evaluated. We need detailed preclinical toxicology studies in multiple animal models at various doses looking for any potential side effects, not just hemolysis. These studies are a non-negotiable prerequisite to establish a safe starting dose range for any human trials. We have to ensure we don't cause more harm than good.
Safety first, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Any other major hurdles?
Yes, and this is perhaps the most significant limitation right now, a point we simply cannot stress enough: the complete absence of clinical data in humans.
So everything we've discussed today
Is derived exclusively from in vitro cell culture experiments and in vivo animal models.
Yeah.
Every single finding, direct effects, mechanisms, potency, synergy is all preclinical.
And the jump from preclinical to clinical is huge.
Massive. While these preclinical studies are essential for establishing proof of concept and understanding how it might work, Their results do not always translate directly to success or safety in human patients. Human tumor biology is complex. People metabolize drugs differently. Immune interactions are intricate. Outcomes can differ significantly from simplified lab models.
So interpret with caution.
Interpret with extreme caution, pending the results of future, well-designed clinical trials in humans. That is the gold standard, the only way to know for sure if it works and is safe for people, and we simply aren't there yet with Platycodon D.
Okay. So considering all this really promising preclinical research, but also understanding these formidable hurdles, what's the most likely or maybe the most rational way for Platycodon D to potentially be used in cancer treatment down the road? Is it seen as a standalone cure or something else?
That's the key question. Synthesizing the full spectrum of evidence we have so far, the most rational and overwhelmingly promising clinical role for Platycodon D is unequivocally not as a standalone monotherapy. It's not likely to be a magic bullet on its own. But rather, it emerges as a potentially powerful combination agent. Its real strength, based on the preclinical data, seems to lie in its ability to address some of the biggest, most stubborn challenges in modern cancer treatment.
Like drug resistance.
Exactly. Its unique ability to modulate those core resistance pathways and, crucially, to significantly enhance the activity of existing established therapies that seems to be its most promising contribution. It's not about replacing current treatments, it's about empowering them, making them work better or work again.
Okay, can you give examples of how that might work in practice?
Certainly. First, it could act as a chemosensitizer. That means it could potentially overcome or reverse resistance to standard chemotherapy drugs that patients often, unfortunately, become unresponsive to over time.
Like the oxaliplatin example in colorectal cancer?
That's a compelling example from the research, yes. Its capacity to reverse oxaliplatin resistance in those models strongly suggests a future clinical strategy. You could potentially co-administer Platycodon D with conventional chemotherapy to restore its efficacy in patients whose tumors have become resistant, essentially reopening a therapeutic window that had closed.
Making old drugs work again, that would be huge.
It would be. Second, it shows promise as a targeted therapy sensitizer. It might expand the use of already approved targeted drugs.
Like the cetuximab example.
Right. Its ability to resensitize KRAS mutant colorectal cancer cells to the EGFR inhibitor cetuximab by blocking a downstream pathway. That's particularly exciting. KRAS mutations often make cancers resistant to EGFR inhibitors, leaving patients with fewer options. PD could potentially open up targeted treatment options for patient groups who are currently ineligible for certain effective drugs due to these resistance mutations.
Expanding the reach of targeted therapies, also very important.
Very. And third, arguably its most transformative potential is as an immunosensitizer.
Back to the thyroid cancer example.
Exactly. Its ability to enhance pembrolizumab's efficacy in those papillary thyroid cancer models, potentially by making those cold tumors hot, represents a major aspirational goal in the field of immuno-oncology.
Suggesting a broader strategy.
It suggests a potential strategy of combining Platycodon D with immune checkpoint inhibitors, like Pembrolizumab, in various tumors that currently show only limited response to these powerful treatments. Papillary thyroid cancer serves as the leading proof of concept for this approach right now.
So trying to make immunotherapy work for more patients.
That's the ultimate goal of that line of research. It's an area of intense focus because finding ways to overcome resistance to immunotherapy could truly revolutionize cancer care across many different cancer types.
Here's where it gets really exciting then. This research positions Platycodon D not as a replacement, but as you said, as a crucial strategic partner. It could help unlock resistance, enhance the power of treatments we already have, and potentially make them effective for a much wider range of patients. It really could shift the landscape of what's possible.
That's certainly the hope and the direction the preclinical research is pointing towards. It's about combination, synergy, and overcoming resistance. Hashtag hacked outro. So what does this all mean for you listening today? Platycodon D, this remarkable compound derived from, a humble traditional remedy, the balloon flower root, is showing truly extraordinary promise, at least in the laboratory setting.
Its ability to directly target cancer cells through multiple, often sophisticated mechanisms.
And especially its potential to make existing cutting-edge treatments like chemotherapy, targeted therapy, and perhaps most excitingly, immunotherapy, significantly more effective. That's a compelling and rapidly expanding area of ongoing scientific research.
But while we eagerly await human clinical trials, and we have to keep stressing, Those trials are absolutely essential to confirm these robust preclinical findings.
Absolutely essential.
The early insights from our sources paint a clear picture of a natural compound with really broad spectrum potential. It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it, that groundbreaking discoveries often come from unexpected places, sometimes from ancient wisdom meeting the most modern, rigorous scientific inquiry.
It really is. And it raises an important question, maybe something for you to consider as we wrap up. As we continue to uncover more natural compounds like Platycodon D, compounds with such potent and multifaceted effects against complex diseases like cancer, how might the landscape of future treatment evolve?
How might we truly integrate these traditional insights with cutting-edge, personalized, perhaps more comprehensive therapeutic approaches?
Exactly. How do we best combine the wisdom of the past with the tools of the future to aim for the most effective and maybe even gentler approaches to cancer care?
That's a fascinating thought to mull over. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Platycodon D. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and perhaps, yeah, a little more curious about the incredible potential hidden within the natural world around us.